Greetings and thank you for being here. I'm sincerely grateful you've taken a moment out of your day to watch this video. If you choose to subscribe to my channel, please know that your support would truly mean a great deal to me. Now let me share a personal story with you. My name is Miller. There are few experiences more painful than being hurt by the very person you've devoted your life to supporting. For several years, my world revolved around caring for my wife, who had become physically disabled. Every decision I made, every plan I had, was centered on her needs. I never would have believed that beneath all that devotion, something deeply disloyal was taking root, a betrayal that would not only end our marriage, but also leave lasting scars on my ability to trust. Kimberly and I had been married for 3 years before everything began to unravel. In the beginning, our relationship was filled with love and strength. We met during our final year of college, quickly formed a close bond, and dated for 2 years before getting engaged. I truly believed we were laying the foundation for a life that would endure. During the early days of our marriage, things were just as I had hoped. We both held full-time jobs. I worked in the accounting department of a mid-sized firm, and Kimberly was employed in the media division of a marketing agency. Within a year, we purchased a cozy home in a quiet neighborhood, began building up our savings, and often talked about starting a family in the near future. One of Kimberly's most striking qualities was her boundless energy and love for the outdoors. She had a true passion for adventure, and I admired her drive to explore. We bonded deeply over hikes, weekend camping trips, and other active pastimes. That shared lifestyle brought us even closer together. But everything shifted in a single moment, on a rainy October evening. Kimberly was driving home from work when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into her car at full speed. The impact was devastating. The left side of her vehicle was crushed, and it took first responders nearly an hour to extract her from the wreck. The extent of her injuries was overwhelming. Both her lower and middle spine sustained severe trauma. She went through several surgeries and spent months in the hospital. Eventually, doctors delivered the life-altering news: she would be permanently disabled. Chronic pain and limited mobility would now define her everyday life. The woman I had once seen scaling mountain trails was now confined to a wheelchair, dependent on others for daily tasks she once handled with ease. That loss of autonomy affected not only her physical life, but her emotional state as well. Her entire future had to be re-envisioned, and so did mine. I never hesitated in my decision to stay by her side. My love for Kimberly went far deeper than physical circumstances. I made a solemn promise to walk with her through this new chapter, no matter how challenging it might become. In the months after the accident, I stepped into a role I never expected. I became her full-time caregiver. I learned how to transfer her safely between the bed and wheelchair, assist with bathing and hygiene, manage her medication regimen, and adapt our living space to her new physical needs. My lifestyle had to shift dramatically. I reorganized my work schedule to spend more time at home, arranged for remote work whenever possible, and used my vacation days for doctor's appointments and hospital visits. I took on virtually every responsibility around the house, as Kimberly could no longer manage them on her own. Financially, the pressure was immense. While the accident settlement helped, it wasn't nearly enough to meet the long-term demands: ongoing treatment, specialized equipment, home modifications. I often found myself working late into the night after long days of caregiving, but I didn't allow myself to complain. My love for her still gave me strength. We undertook major renovations to make our home accessible. We installed ramps, widened doorways, remodeled the bathroom with grab bars and a roll-in shower, and converted the guest room into a main-floor bedroom to eliminate stairs. Every detail in our home had to be considered with her comfort and safety in mind. Yet no amount of remodeling could ease the emotional weight we were both carrying. Kimberly grappled with intense emotional struggles. Grief, anger, and depression became constant companions. Losing her independence had shaken her to her core. There were days when she questioned her purpose, and it was deeply painful to witness. I did everything in my power to provide emotional support, always reminding myself that her pain was valid, that it came from a place of unimaginable loss. I urged her to pursue therapy, and I often joined her during sessions to show my commitment. We both recognized that the path to healing involved more than just physical rehabilitation. It demanded emotional resilience and mental strength as well. One of the most difficult aspects of this journey was the isolation. The activities Kimberly once enjoyed were no longer within reach, and as her social world diminished, I became her main, sometimes only, source of emotional connection. Although I accepted that role with love, the demands of being both caregiver and partner left me exhausted, inside and out. As part of her recovery plan, Kimberly began working with a physical therapist named Duncan. He specialized in spinal cord injuries and brought both expertise and empathy to the table. His presence felt like a blessing, someone who could offer hope when we both needed it most. Physical therapy became a routine part of our lives. Kimberly slowly began showing small signs of progress, subtle improvements, but meaningful ones. I was deeply grateful that she had someone capable guiding her forward. I hoped that, through Duncan's help, she might rediscover a sense of strength and purpose. Kimberly's therapy sessions became a central focus in her recovery, a tangible goal that offered her much-needed emotional grounding. After her meetings with Duncan, she usually returned home noticeably more upbeat and invigorated, a welcome contrast to the despair and fatigue that had characterized the early phases of her healing process. I made it a priority to support her commitment to recovery, often reshuffling my own obligations to guarantee she had dependable transportation. These appointments stood out as one of the few positive constants in her otherwise challenging days, and it genuinely lifted my spirits to see her engaged in something that brought back a sense of purpose and hope. Gradually, I adjusted to the realities of life as a caregiver, all while trying to retain fragments of our former routines and uphold a balanced partnership. It wasn't without struggle. Many days, the responsibility felt suffocating. The physical demands and emotional strain of caregiving left me drained. Yet I had pledged to remain beside her through both triumph and adversity, and I took those vows to heart. For me, being her husband meant enduring the storms together, no matter how harsh or prolonged. I stayed resolute in honoring that promise, regardless of how burdensome it became. By the 5th year following her accident, we had settled into a rhythm that, while far from ideal, was at least sustainable. I found a way to juggle the dual responsibilities of supporting Kimberly's needs while keeping my job and relationship intact. Though our reality was worlds apart from the future we had once envisioned, I felt that we were making the most of a difficult situation. One Saturday began like any other, with no hint of the disruption it would bring. Looking to decompress from a demanding week at work, I decided to wash the car in the driveway. The weather was pleasant, and the task offered a chance to enjoy some fresh air and physical activity, something I rarely had time for between work and caregiving. Kimberly remained indoors as I laid out the cleaning materials, enjoying the methodical rhythm of scrubbing and rinsing the vehicle. The simplicity of the chore felt like a quiet escape from my otherwise hectic routine. While hosing down the car, a stray stream of water veered off and splashed across the patio table, landing squarely on Kimberly's phone. Alarmed at the potential damage to such a vital device, I rushed over to inspect it. Water had seeped into the phone case, and the screen was beginning to behave erratically. I quickly grabbed a towel and tried to dry it off, but the phone started glitching, launching apps and navigating screens without any input from me. I brought the malfunctioning phone to Kimberly, explained what had happened, and apologized for the accident. She was visibly distressed, and understandably so. The phone was not only her primary means of communication, but also a lifeline for her medical needs. We both agreed it needed immediate professional attention. The phone held more than just contacts. It contained health data and essential apps that she depended on daily. That Monday, I brought it to a local repair shop that specialized in fixing water-damaged electronics and had solid reviews. The technician explained that recovery from water exposure could be unpredictable. They would need to take the device apart, clean the internal components, and test each part to see what could be saved. The process would take a few days. In the meantime, Kimberly had to rely on our landline and occasionally my phone, an inconvenience but a manageable one for the short term. When the phone was finally ready, the technician informed me that they had successfully restored most of its functionality. He suggested we test all applications and systems thoroughly to make sure nothing was compromised. Back at home, I began methodically checking everything, calls, texts, apps, saved data, to confirm that it was all in working order. But as I scrolled through the apps during the inspection, I stumbled upon something I was never supposed to see. In her messaging app, there was an extensive conversation between Kimberly and Duncan, her physical therapist, that was alarmingly personal and entirely inappropriate. The messages were filled with emotional confessions and romantic exchanges, leaving no doubt that they had been intimately involved for over a year. Their interactions crossed far beyond professional boundaries. What cut even deeper was the discovery that they had been meeting at our home, specifically in our bedroom, during times when I was at work or out on errands. While I was organizing her care and putting in long hours to keep our lives afloat, they had used our most private space as a rendezvous for their affair. The frequency and timing of their messages made it clear that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a long-running, intentional betrayal. While I was sacrificing my time, energy, and emotional well-being for her recovery, she was actively hiding a relationship that undermined everything I had been trying to preserve. As I read through the thread, a crushing sense of heartbreak set in. The woman whose needs had dictated nearly every decision I made, the one I had restructured my life around, had been deceiving me in the most profound and intimate way possible. The messages left no ambiguity. Despite often telling me she was too tired or in pain for closeness, she had been physically involved with Duncan. Her limitations, as it turned out, were selective and misleading. The damage went far beyond physical infidelity. It represented a complete collapse of the trust and moral framework that had supported me through years of caregiving. Every act of devotion, every sleepless night, every sacrifice I had made now felt mocked and meaningless. This wasn't a fleeting lapse in judgment. It was a sustained, calculated betrayal that unraveled the very fabric of our marriage. I sat in the car just outside our home for close to an hour, unable to summon the will to go inside. My mind was spinning, trying to process the truth I had uncovered and brace myself for the confrontation that awaited me with Kimberly. The evidence was undeniable, yet I knew she would likely try to deny, minimize, or excuse it somehow. When I finally gathered the strength to walk through the door, I found her in the living room and wasted no time. I showed her the messages I had come across on her phone and directly asked her to explain what had been happening between her and Duncan. Her initial response was complete denial. Despite the clear evidence, she insisted the messages were being taken out of context. She claimed Duncan had simply been there for her during a tough period, and that their exchanges were innocent and misconstrued. But as I pressed her further, especially about the intimate nature of the messages and the references to encounters in our own bedroom, her tone changed. She began to downplay the situation, referring to it as a fleeting mistake, something that didn't mean much. But I knew better. What I had seen didn't reflect a one-time lapse or misunderstanding. It pointed to an ongoing, intentional affair that had been continuing for over a year, during which I had been looking after her and running our household. I told her I couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed me on such a deep level. The trust had been so thoroughly destroyed that there was no realistic way to rebuild it. Kimberly refused to accept that the marriage was ending. She begged me to reconsider, promising to sever all contact with Duncan and to do anything necessary to regain my trust. But for me, there was no room for reconciliation. This wasn't about a moment of poor judgment. It was a sustained, conscious deception. For more than a year, she had knowingly violated the trust between us while I was devoting myself to her needs. I told her plainly that I intended to file for divorce and that she would need to begin making arrangements for her own care and living situation. I no longer had the emotional capacity to continue being her caregiver while knowing the extent of her betrayal. Her reaction swung wildly, pleading one moment, angry and accusatory the next. She claimed I was abandoning her in her time of greatest need and dismissed the affair as a trivial mistake, painting my reaction as overly severe. But there was no way to deny what I had read and seen. This wasn't a temporary lapse in judgment. It was a carefully concealed betrayal carried out within the walls of our home, in the very space we shared as a couple, while I was out working and taking care of everything for both of us. That same night, I moved out of our bedroom and began the process of meeting with a divorce attorney to explore the legal path forward. Ending the marriage proved to be especially difficult due to Kimberly's disability and the care responsibilities I had taken on. Despite this, I was committed to separating myself from a relationship built on deceit. The emotional toll was heavy, and the financial implications were significant. Her legal team argued that I was walking away from a dependent spouse and that my role as her primary caregiver should factor into the division of property and support. My attorney responded by asserting that Kimberly's infidelity constituted a breach of the marriage itself and that her medical condition didn't absolve her of responsibility or entitle her to disproportionate support. The legal battle quickly evolved into a complex dispute involving marital obligations, disability considerations, and ethical responsibilities. As the legal discovery progressed, additional evidence emerged that further confirmed the deliberate nature of the affair. Their relationship hadn't been accidental or impulsive. It had been maintained with care and consistency, with no concern for how it might affect me or our vows. Subpoenas of her medical and therapy records revealed that many of her supposed appointments had been used as cover to meet with Duncan. What she had described as therapy was, in many cases, something very different. The financial aspects of the divorce were equally tangled. I had renovated the house to accommodate Kimberly's mobility needs, adding ramps, modifying bathrooms, and making other adjustments, improvements that now counted as part of our shared property. Regardless of who retained the house, those modifications benefited her, and her legal team argued that, combined with her condition, she deserved greater financial support. They dismissed her infidelity as irrelevant to the division of assets and portrayed me as morally and legally bound to continue supporting her. My lawyer pushed back, emphasizing that the core of our relationship, trust, had been completely shattered, and that her health status didn't erase the seriousness of her actions. The emotional strain was relentless. Even while the legal process was ongoing, I was forced to continue living in the same home with her. Sharing a space with someone who had deceived me so profoundly was agonizing. During that period, Kimberly made repeated attempts to reconcile, sometimes tearfully remorseful, sometimes bitter and accusatory. She accused me of abandonment, made promises to change, and continued to insist the affair had been minor and survivable. But I had already made my choice. There was no way back to a relationship that had been damaged beyond repair. I couldn't bring myself to offer care, affection, or even basic companionship to someone who had kept such a betrayal hidden for so long. Trust, once broken like that, was unrecoverable. As the divorce proceedings continued, it became clear that Duncan was now facing serious professional consequences. As a licensed physical therapist, his involvement with a patient represented a major ethical violation. Once the details of the affair became part of the court record, he came under investigation by his licensing board and risked disciplinary action, even the loss of his career. Their choices didn't just destroy a marriage, they threatened his professional standing and livelihood as well. After months entangled in legal complexities, courtroom sessions, and emotionally charged negotiations, the divorce was finally finalized. The settlement required me to part with a significant portion of the joint assets, including a larger share of the home's equity and segments of my retirement savings, all to guarantee that Kimberly had the financial means necessary for her everyday life and long-term care. The financial hit was substantial and painful, but I accepted it as the necessary price for regaining my freedom from a relationship long eroded by lies and betrayal. The time I spent caring for Kimberly taught me endurance, loyalty, and the depth of personal sacrifice. But it also exposed a sobering truth. Some wounds inflicted by betrayal are too deep to allow healing within the relationship. Breaking free from what remained of our marriage was anything but simple, yet it was, undeniably, a liberation. For the first time in years, I could prioritize my own well-being without constantly reorganizing my life around someone else's health needs and limitations. I moved into a smaller place, one that reflected who I was, not the necessities of being someone's caregiver. I resumed a steady work schedule, no longer burdened by the relentless cycle of hospital trips and medical logistics that used to shape my days. These outward adjustments happened relatively fast, but the internal work, the emotional recovery, proved far more gradual and difficult. Accepting the depth of pain that comes from being deceived by someone you gave your life to was a heavy burden. It shook the trust I had placed in others, especially within intimate relationships. In time, I turned to therapy to help unravel the psychological weight that had been building long before I ever knew about Kimberly's infidelity. Counseling helped me recognize that the emotional toll of being betrayed by someone you're also taking care of carries a distinct complexity. Healing from that kind of pain requires a deeper, more layered process. Through therapy, I gained perspective. I had shown consistency and integrity, while her betrayal stemmed from her own unresolved shortcomings, not from anything I failed to do. What I had once called unconditional love, I began to recognize as something else entirely, a mix of genuine care and a one-sided dynamic that allowed destructive patterns to continue unchecked. My motivations were anchored in empathy and duty, but she took advantage of that, prioritizing her own desires without regard for the harm she was causing, both to our relationship and to me as a person. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle but telling, indicating her emotional withdrawal and growing dissatisfaction. Her disinterest in our shared experiences, her dismissive attitude toward the care I provided, and her increasing time spent away from home were all quiet warnings I chose not to confront. The truth of her affair came out in an almost absurd twist of fate. A splash of water on her phone while I was washing the car led to its malfunction, exposing messages that laid everything bare. The irony was bitter, that such a trivial accident could unravel a carefully concealed betrayal. Without that random mishap, I might have remained in the dark for much longer. Today, I'm grateful the truth revealed itself when it did, painful as it was. Continuing to give so much to someone who had emotionally exited the relationship would have only deepened the damage I was already feeling. That revelation didn't just end a marriage. It fundamentally reshaped how I view love, trust, and the importance of honoring one's own needs in a partnership. I still hold the belief that standing by your partner in hardship is meaningful. But I've also come to understand that certain betrayals create fractures too deep to mend. Sometimes the only way to protect your dignity is to walk away from something that has become emotionally destructive. I gave everything I could to support someone who, in the end, chose deceit. But through that choice, she unintentionally gave me the opportunity to reclaim my own future. The day her phone broke, more than a secret was exposed. It laid bare the uncomfortable reality of our marriage and the truth of what I had been silently enduring. The divorce, though costly both financially and personally, marked the beginning of a life rebuilt with honesty and renewed self-respect. Some of life's hardest truths force us into growth we never wanted, but in doing so, they allow us to live with greater authenticity. This is where that chapter closes. Thank you for witnessing this journey. If this story connected with you, feel free to explore others shared here. Until next time.